My husband saw all my DMs through a spy app and decided he doesn't want to see me anymore.
Cheating on a good person is like throwing away diamonds and picking up a rock. I cheated on my husband, and I'm regretting it now. I don't think I would be able to get over the guilt I'm feeling right now. I'm ashamed writing this because I didn't know what I was thinking. My husband was a great guy, but I allowed myself to be carried away by the feeling of the moment. My name is Janet, and I am a 25-year-old event planner. The name of my husband is Gray, and he is a 27-years-old interior designer. Apparently, Gray and I have gone our separate ways just a few weeks ago. My husband and I met at one of my best friend's wedding. My friend, whom I have been friends with for many years, was getting married that year, and it happened that I was the event planner. Her name is Kate. So Kate and I have been friends since we were in elementary school. We practically grew up together. So it was going to be her big day, and she trusted me with the contract of planning her wedding. When I was a teenager, I used to do the decorations for Christmas at our house. I loved decorating and also putting things in order. My mom is an event planner, and I learned that skill from her. I often followed her whenever she had work to do. She earned her living by planning events like birthdays, weddings, Christmas parties, functions, and others. And so I became passionate about the skill. I pursued it after my graduation from college, and now I have anchored so many events. My best friend Kate thought I was the perfect one to plan her events, and so she gave me the contract. I planned everything, did what needs to be put in order, and made sure nothing was missing. The day of the wedding came, of course. Kate was excited that she was getting married. Everything was set, everyone was in attendance, and the event went out fine. I was at a corner of the hall conversing with the rest of my friends when a handsome-looking young man approached us. According to him, he wanted to use the restroom and didn't know his way around. I offered to help him and directed him to the restroom. He went, and a few minutes later he came back to where my friends and I were seated. Before he came back from the restroom, my friends teased me about the way I offered to help him. Apparently, when he came asking for help, I was already falling head over heels for him because of how good he looked. My friends got me and made me uncomfortable with it. So he came back from the restroom and approached us once again and asked if he could join us, but at that time signaled themselves and excused the both of us. He introduced himself as Greg, and I also did the same. He thanked me for helping him out and asked if we could chit-chat for a few. Of course I agreed, and we got talking. We talked about a lot of things and also about the wedding. Greg told me that it was his best friend that was getting married to Kate. He was also surprised when I told him that Kate was also my best friend. We laughed about it because it was such a lovely coincidence that both our best friends were getting married to each other. While we were talking, I told him that I was the event planner for the wedding. Gray was very impressed and even commended my work. At that time, it was our first time meeting, but it felt like we had known each other for years. Few hours later, the event came to an end and everyone left. My workers and I stayed behind because we had a lot of things to do. We decorated the hall, and so we had to pack all the decorating equipment. So guys, we were packing up when Greg came and told me that he wanted to help me out with some things. Even though we needed an extra hand, I declined immediately. But Gray insisted and told me it was fine. He joined us and made our work easier. After we were done and ready to leave, Gray also offered to take me home. But at that time, I agreed immediately because it was difficult to get a cab at that place. So I agreed for him to take me home. On our way home, we were talking about a lot of things. It was as if we continued from where we had stopped during the event. I got to my destination and asked for my contact details, which I gave him. He promised to give me a call when he gets home and he drives off. A few hours later, Greg gave me a call. From there, we saved each other's contact numbers and also followed ourselves on social media. We went on a couple of dates and hung out together. He attended a lot of events that I was in charge of and also helped me out with the little he could. And after a few months of dating, we finally got married to each other. It felt so good, and I was very happy. Those that were close to us knew how we met. To Kate and her husband Matt, their best friends got married to each other, just like how it was for me and Gray. Our marriage was blissful and everything went well. Gray is an interior designer. He got so many job opportunities and also worked in many places. Our jobs are kind of similar but different in terms of carrying out the job. Gray dealt with decorating homes and offices, and I specialized in planning an event. Just like me, he got contracts to design home and office interiors. We both worked on a daily basis and earned our own income, but Gray insisted that he was going to take care of the things at home. And so, we both fed on his own income, and I assisted him with other things, even though he often complained about it. Despite our busy schedules, we still made out time to go out on regular dates and hung out together as couples. Our first year together as a married couple was memorable. At that time, everything was new, and we spent a lot of time together. So, guys, my husband and I went on with our normal lives. Our families invited us for a couple dinner dates, but we weren't able to attend any due to our busy schedules. Sometimes Greg often traveled out of the town for work, and I also traveled out to plan events. We hardly even see each other, and so there were days we barely spent time together. Our families, most especially mine, complained about how my work often took most of my time. My mom advised me to quit the job so as to take care of the house, since Gray was mostly traveling out of the town. I declined since my husband didn't complain or saw anything wrong with it, and she also advised that I only take jobs that are within the town so as to not leave the house empty. I later realized what my mom meant by that. She didn't take any contract that would make her travel out of town because she wanted to take care of her home and also her husband and children. And so, guys, I heeded to her advice because I knew it was a genuine one. A few months later, I stopped accepting contracts outside the town, and I focused on taking care of the house while my husband traveled out for work. I did my work within the town, and sometimes I returned home late. Due to the unending demand from our parents, Gray and I decided to have dinner with them. So, we were to have dinner on a Saturday. I called my husband if he was going to come, which he agreed to. The trip was to last a week, but he made it short and came back on a Friday so he could be able to attend the dinner. The day Gray was coming back home, I called him multiple times, but he didn't pick up. It was past 9 p.m. and I wasn't able to reach him. I got scared and thought about a lot of negative things. His lines were switched off, and all means to reach out to him was in vain. I kept pacing around and thought of what to do, but nothing was coming. At some point, I decided to not think much about it, and so I went to sleep. Just when I was about to close my eyes and sleep, I heard the doorbell ring. I hurriedly rushed down to find out who it was, and so I opened the door. After I opened the door, to my greatest surprise, I saw my husband standing at the door. I was so excited that I grabbed him so tight and quarreled for not calling me, and I asked him what happened to his lines. But he told me that he had a low battery and wasn't able to charge it, and so his phone went off before he boarded the plane. At that point, I wasn't even angry anymore because I was happy Gray was back and I had missed him so much. We literally talked throughout the night and also planned how we were going to attend the dinner. After a while, we went to bed and retired for the night. The next morning, we woke up and did our morning routine. Gray also helped me out in doing some of the house chores. After a while, we ate breakfast and continued with the house chores. We watched a movie together after we were done with the chores. It was a long movie, so we decided to watch it during our time away, since we had nothing to do at that time. A few hours later, it was almost time for the dinner date with our families. Apparently, my mom and Gray's mom had been planning on this family dinner date. Gray and I were the main agenda for it. They wanted us to hang out with them since we hardly came to see them or spent time with them during family hangouts. So, guys, Gray and I got dressed and headed out of the house. The dinner was at Gray's family house. We arrived there and greeted everyone. Our parents were happy to see us after a long time despite staying in the same city. Everything was set and everyone arrived there. We chatted for a while and even laughed over some of our childhood memories. Gray's mom, Philomena, engaged us in a little game. Indeed, the dinner was great and we had so much fun. While we were at the house, my phone kept on beeping. A lot of notifications were coming in. I didn't pay much attention to it because I didn't want to be disrespectful. I didn't want to be distracted by my phone or reply to any messages because it would have been rude of me to have done that. And so I silenced my phone. Gray asked if everything was okay because everyone had turned to me because of the notification sound. But I assured him that everything was fine. We carried on with what we were doing and the dinner was great. We even spent the night over there before we returned back to our home the following day. 3 days later, I decided to go through my phone because while I was at the dinner date with our families, I kept on having Instagram message notifications from an unknown profile. Apparently, I had my job posted on my social media platforms so as to reach out to a lot of audience. And so the unknown person reached out to me to help him plan his birthday party. We got talking and started off as business partners. I planned out everything and made the necessary arrangement. My work was done, and I was about heading out when he approached me. At that time, we just met for the first time. We communicated online, and all the transactions were done online as well. He introduced himself as Josh, and I also introduced myself. He complimented my work and asked for my contact details, which I gave him, and I left. Josh kept on texting and calling me to have a coffee. I declined on several occasions, but he was persistent. I agreed to go out with him, but only when he stopped calling me so my husband would not get suspicious about it, and he agreed. And so, guys, from what started as an innocent coffee date grew up into something stronger. We kept on meeting each other. We communicated on social media throughout. This went on for about a couple of months. Sometimes I used the excuse of going to work to hang out with Josh. At that time, I was overprotective of my phone because of how intimate my chat with Josh was. My chat with him intensified to the extent that I didn't care about my husband again. There was a time Gray was around and didn't go to work for a whole week. I asked him if everything was fine, but he said he was taking the week off to rest. I didn't think much about it, and at the same time was not happy because Josh was not going to be able to come over to the house at that time. We kept chatting online. I smiled whenever Josh and I were chatting on the phone. Sometimes I forgot that my husband was even around. I giggled at every message he sent and also laughed at some of his jokes. Throughout the week my husband was around, he never asked what made me laugh whenever I was operating my phone. He thought it was a random news feed, and so he didn't bother asking. The week he had taken off was over, and he told me he had a business trip with his workers. I was very excited about it and was anxious for him to leave so Josh could come over immediately. At that time, it took Gray forever to leave the house. He was restless about something. I asked him, but he didn't give a reasonable answer. I noticed that he was Googling about something. I was able to glance through his phone, but I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe he was Googling about the designs he wanted to create for his clients. So I thought to myself. I didn't think too much about it. After a few minutes, he told me he was ready to go. We hugged and bade him goodbye. Not long after he stepped out of the gate, I took my phone and texted Josh to come over. He was also excited to hear that Josh was going out of town. He came over a few hours later. We watched a lot of movies and did a mini party for the both of us. We had a lot to drink, and we spent the night together at my place. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover. We had a lot to drink, so it was normal for me to have woken up with a headache. I turned to the other side of the bed but didn't find Josh. I thought of where he could be, because he wasn't familiar with the neighborhood. Just when I was about to get up from bed, the door opened. I saw Josh with a cup. He stretched out the cup to me and told me it would relieve me of the hangover. I collected it and saw that it was a cup of coffee. Yes, guys, Josh woke up early to make coffee for him. It felt good because of how much he cared about me. I drank the coffee and we both headed to the kitchen. We made breakfast and ate together. A few minutes later, he told me that he was going to work and he promised to be back in the evening. My husband traveled for a 3-day trip, and so he wasn't going to be in town at that time. Josh left, and I also prepared myself to go to work so as to not get bored. I got dressed and was about to drive out when I got a call from Gray. He told me that he wanted to check on me. I got so carried away that I forgot to ask him about his trip. I apologized for not checking on him and lied that I was occupied with work. Gray sounded fine and told me it was fine. We talked for a few minutes before we got off the phone. I went to work and carried on with my normal work routine that day. 2 days later, my husband came back from his work trip. As usual, I was at work when he returned. I didn't know that he was going to be home that early. He usually did come back late, but at that time he came back early. Before he came back, I had texted Josh to come over so we could have dinner before Gray gets back. He agreed, and so I made all necessary preparations before heading out to work that day. I closed from work around 1 p.m. because I was very tired, and also I could put things together before dinner. I got into the car and drove to a nearby grocery store to get a few things. I bought what I wanted and left. I got home and headed to open the door. I noticed that the door was not how I had locked it before I went to work that day. I wondered who it was. I knew it wasn't Josh because he would have told me before going to my place, and I also knew it wasn't Gray because he was out of town and was supposed to be back by 10 p.m. I panicked and thought maybe the house had gotten robbed. I mustered courage and opened the door. Guys, guess who I saw? It was my husband, Gray. I was very shocked to see him because I wasn't expecting him to be back home at that time. I composed myself and acted like I was not surprised. I greeted him, but he gave me a cold shoulder. I thought maybe he was stressed out, so I didn't ask why he responded that way. Just when I was about to go upstairs to change, my husband called me back. I turned to him, but the look on his face was terrifying. At that point, I got very scared. He grabbed my elbow and twisted it in a painful manner. I began pleading with him to stop, but he meant business. He looked at me and yelled, "Who the hell was Josh?" I was so shocked and stuttered, trying to come up with something to say. Just in that process, Gray pushed me and I fell down flat. He looked at me in disgust and shook his head in disbelief. At that moment, I was crying bitterly. I stood up from where I was and held his hands. I tried to explain everything to him, but he told me to let go of his hands that very minute. It was then he started narrating how he got to know about my infidelity with Josh. I didn't know that Gray knew everything, but decided to stay quiet. Guys, my husband narrated how he came up with the plan to expose me. He told me that he got suspicious about my constant late-night chats and how happy I was anytime I operated my phone. Gray also said that he got hold of my phone the day he was about traveling for the 3 days trip. He saw how excited I was when told me about his trip, and I took my phone. Gray said he got curious and then made a plan to get hold of my phone to see what was getting me excited. Of course, it was difficult for him to get hold of it at that moment because he needed time to go through it. And so, he installed a spyware app on my phone to monitor my chats. The type he installed on my phone enabled him to see past messages that I had deleted. And there he saw inappropriate messages and videos that Josh and I messaged to each other. Gray also said that he made the 3-day trip up. He stood a few miles away from the neighborhood and saw Josh coming in and out of the house. He told me that he wanted to have enough evidence to throw me out of the house. And so, I fell right into his trap, guys. He screenshotted all the chats and showed it to me, and also told me the name of the app he installed on my phone. Update. So guys, I'm here to tell you all that happened after my husband got to know about my infidelity. Gray narrated everything to me, from how he got to know to when he installed the app. I'm ashamed of myself right now because the chats between me and Josh were very inappropriate. We flirted a lot on the phone, and I was carried away by the feeling of the moment. I should have put an end to it, knowing fully well that I was married, but I got so loose with. Gray came back that day with the divorce papers. He signed it and gave it to me and then sent me out of the house. He told me to go and have dinner with Josh somewhere else, but definitely not his house. My husband threw me out of the house that day. I had nowhere to run to. I couldn't dare go to my parents' house because they would disown immediately. My parents are against divorce and, most importantly, against infidelity. I knew how much my dad hated it when I was still a child, but I messed up. I left the house and called Josh to come pick me up. He came to where I was, and I told him everything that had happened at home. He felt pity for me and patted me. I asked him if I could come stay with him, but he bluntly turned it down. He told me that his girlfriend was in town, and he didn't want an unwanted guest. He also asked for us to break up since there was nothing left for the both of us again. Josh left me at the mainland and drove off. He blocked my lines and also blocked me on all social media platforms. My husband also did the same. So guys, this is my story. I am now left with nothing. I was served with divorce papers and also sent out of the house. I made a terrible mistake and I regret it. I feel disgusted writing this right now because I don't know how to hide my face. The news should have reached my parents by now, but I'm not sure I would be able to face them. I have no excuse, and I don't blame anyone for my infidelity. My husband doesn't have anything to do with it. He was a good man, and I cheated on him with someone that didn't think twice before denying me. I shouldn't have gone down the path I took. I guess I deserved what I got in the end.
My husband and my affair partner teamed up together and ruined my life. I know I did wrong by cheating on my husband, and I take accountability for it. I wish I could rewrite all the wrongs. I regret every bit of it now. I was deceived and also dumped. My affair partner, whom I trusted so much, decided to make my life a living hell. Now I'm currently served with divorce papers and left with nothing. Hi guys, my name is Mirabelle, and I am a 27-year-old entrepreneur. I owned a store where I sewed clothes and sold them. I had always dreamt of being independent and doing what I love. I have passion for my job, and I design most of my outfits. I also have people working for me at my workshop, and I'm married to a software engineer, Frederick. He is 27 years old. My husband and I have been married for 5 years now. We have known each other since college. We started off as friends when we were in school. I met Frederick at one of the annual school events that year. We started off like friends. It was a mutual feeling for me, but for Frederick, he was more interested in getting to know me more. We eventually started dating and went out together. We studied together during exam periods and did a lot of things together in school. As high school lovers, we went to school parties together, concerts, and we had fun. While we were in school, Frederick was a responsible guy. He was very careful anytime we went to those parties. And that was one of the things I loved about him. He is so gentle and kind-hearted. Those that knew him in school loved him because of how coordinated he was, and he took his studies seriously. We had a big social circle among my friends. Some of them had boyfriends and girlfriends. Frederick and I were an extension. We all hung out together and, most importantly, studied our books. 1 year later, we all graduated from college. Frederick and I then decided to move to Virginia, where our family was based. From there, he started introducing me to his family and all his friends. I was invited a couple of times to his home to have dinner with his family. It was a family of 4, Frederick's parents and his sister. It happened that Frederick's mom and I shared the same name. We also had a lot in common. Frederick's family were very welcoming. I got to know more about each and every one of them. Being the only sibling that Frederick had, he was very protective of his sister Leah. Frederick never jokes about anything that has to do with Leah. Leah was also kind-hearted just like Frederick. Their mom Gladys was also nice to me. She treated me like her second daughter. She didn't give me any reason to complain about anything. She always made sure I was very comfortable anytime I came around. Frederick's dad also was not an exception. They all treated me like I have known them for a long time. I also introduced Frederick to my family. They loved Frederick as well. I am from a family of 4. I have one sibling just like Frederick. I have a brother and his name is Jason. I love Jason a lot because he's more than a brother to me. We shared everything together and made memories. We were like besties. Everything really moved fast between me and Frederick. Both our families met on several occasions for dinner dates. We were like the perfect match. Our families were also in support of us coming together. I felt happy because I have found someone that loved me unconditionally. Before I met Frederick, I was unlucky with dates. Most of the guys that I had met only came to play around. But Frederick was different. I loved how he noticed every little detail about me. I was very happy to be Frederick's girlfriend. After a few months of graduation from college, Frederick then proposed to me to be his wife, which I accepted wholeheartedly because I loved him so much. Our families made arrangements for the wedding. They handled everything and did what was supposed to be done. I was happy that our families came through for us. The day of the wedding came and we tied the knot together. It was attended by both families and friends. It was a simple wedding. Everything went well and there was no drama of any kind. The wedding came to an end and everyone returned back to their respective destination. Frederick and I moved into our new house a few miles away from our parents. We started a new life as a newly married couple. I was happy to do life with Frederick. Few months of our marriage was blissful. We continued all what we did when we were single. We went out together and also attended a lot of family gatherings. Frederick got a job and he worked to fend for us. Not long after he got a job, I decided to chase my dreams and I opened a clothing store. I have always had a passion for sewing clothes and designing my own outfits. My store was moving really fast and everything went well. I get a lot of orders every week. I couldn't do the job myself because the workload was overwhelming, so I decided to employ some staff to help me out in the store. I also employed some staff that could also sew and design men's outfits. Not long after, my store was now a unisex store. My husband also helped me in putting things in order in my store. He also helped me with the marketing strategy and gave me a lot of exposure. What started like a small business grew into a full-blown one. I made outfits for my husband and his colleagues at work. I also made some for my family and even Frederick's. Everyone supported my business in the little way they could. A few months after I opened my store, one of my college friends, Diana, was getting married. I was very happy, and what even made me happy the most was that she gave me the contract to make the outfit for her bridal train. It was a huge contract, and so I dedicated a lot of time to it, and all the girls that were on the bridal train looked beautiful, and they also loved their outfits. Some of them even patronized me after the event was over. My husband didn't stop helping me to get more audience for me. Frederick was very supportive, and he took his time to make sure I was very comfortable while doing my job. Yes, guys, Frederick was working at his own workplace. He is a software engineer. His work didn't take much of his time, so he always comes back early from work. Sometimes I was the one that often stayed out late at night because of the kind of orders I do get. I have to meet up with them and also make sure that my customers are satisfied. And most times, Frederick was the one that did make the meals we ate and also took care of things at home. Sometimes, when I didn't get back home early, my husband would call to make sure I was okay and waited for me to get back so we could go to bed together. There were times I went out of town to do work, and I stayed for a week or more. My husband never complained because he knew about the nature of my job. One day while I was at my place of work, my husband called me that I should come back early so we could have dinner at home. I told him that I would try to close up early, which he agreed, and we ended the call. That day, I planned everything and promised not to disappoint him. Unfortunately, when I was about closing the store, a customer walked in and said he wanted to have a shirt designed. It was an unfamiliar face, yet looked so handsome. I hurriedly declined because I didn't want to disappoint my husband, but he was persistent and pleaded with me to help him out because he was going to attend an event the next day. Our dinner was to start at 8 p.m., and he came around 7 p.m. I agreed because I had about an hour before the dinner date. As at the time he came, all my staff had already closed from work. I dismissed them early so they could rest that day. I reopened the store and ushered him in. I watched him while he walked around the whole place. He looked pleased with what he saw and commended my efforts. Few minutes later, he walked up to me and told me the type of style he wanted. I took out the fabric and started working on it. We talked about a few things before we introduced ourselves. He introduced himself as Derek, and he stretched his hands for a handshake. We shook hands, and I also introduced myself as Gladys. He went further and said that I had a beautiful place. I was happy about the compliment, and I thanked Derek. Derek told me about the work he was doing and how he recently moved to our town because of work. While I was working on his clothes, he kept on talking about a lot of things. He talked to me like we have known each other for years. Meanwhile, Derek and I were just meeting for the first time. At some point, I didn't pay attention to him because I got tired. He was engrossed in the conversation. I kept looking at the time all through to see if I could get home on time to meet my husband. But I was stocked up with the work. I tried calling Frederick to apologize ahead of time, but his lines were not reachable. At that point, I couldn't stop what I was doing, and I didn't want to disappoint Derek because I had started working on the fabric already. He was a first-time customer, and so I didn't want to give him any reasons to complain. 2 hours later, I was done with the work. I gave it to Derek, but he insisted on giving it a try there, in case of any adjustment. I showed him a room where he could change. He entered the room, and I hurriedly packed up my things, ready to leave. Few minutes later, he came out. I was very happy about the dress, and also complimented my handwork. Honestly speaking, guys, he looked smart in that dress. He went back and changed into the normal clothes he came in with. I gave him my account details, and he wired the money plus an extra pay for taking my time. Derek offered to take me home, but I refused and told him I could manage. Before he left, Derek gave me his private card and told me to call him if I needed anything. I was hesitant at first, but I collected it. He also promised to come around after he got back from the event he wanted to attend, and he drove away. I was very happy because I delivered what he ordered and even gave me an extra tip. I checked my phone to see what time it was, and guess what, guys? It was 10 p.m. I was so shocked. I felt really bad because Frederick had taken time to prepare dinner for the both of us. I stood for a while before I was able to get a cab. While I was on my way home, I kept trying my husband's lines, but still not reachable. I kept on praying that he won't be angry with me for not keeping my promise. I got to my destination and I paid the cabman. I headed to the door and knocked. I knocked for a while, but no response. So I used my spare key and opened the door. I opened the door and met my husband deeply asleep. He must have waited for me, I thought to myself. I proceeded to the dining table and I saw that Frederick had prepared different meals for us to eat. I couldn't wake him up, and so I went to change into my nightwear. I was sad, guys. The next morning, I apologized to him and promised to make it up to him. From the look on his face, I knew that he was very angry about it, but chose to let it slide. I quickly went and prepared for him that day. I made breakfast for us, and we headed out to our place of work. I got to my store and saw that my staff had already started working. I was very pleased with them. They were very hardworking and didn't give me any reason to complain about anything. A few weeks later, Derek showed up to my store again. He told me how everyone complimented on the dress I made for him. From there, Derek and I became close. He often came to my store to have his clothes done or to keep me company. We hung out a couple of times together outside my store, from coffee dates to movie nights. We kept our personal life private, or should I say, I kept my relationship status private from Derek. He never asked if I was single or not. At that point, I was just having fun and didn't see the need to tell him. But Derek told me that he just got out of a broken relationship at that time. I felt bad for him because he was such a handsome guy that shouldn't be heartbroken by any lady. So guys, I didn't tell Derek that I was married. We kept on going out together. I did it in such a way that none of my staff knew what was going on between us. We kept on meeting at secret places to hang out together. Derek knew how to make a lady comfortable. He bought me a lot of things and also took me out to a lot of concerts. Before I met Derek, I forgot that I loved going to parties because of my hectic work schedules. But Derek often advised me to work less and party more. He also said that that's why I employed staff. They are meant to relieve me of my workload. I agreed with him and I left the work for my employees to handle while I went out with him. My husband didn't know about Derek or my secret affairs. At that time, I didn't see the need to tell him because I was just relieving myself from work. And also there was nothing serious going on between Derek and I. Few months after Derek and I started dating, he asked me if we could travel out of town to go see places. He promised to be fun if I agreed to the offer, but I told him to give me time to think about it. I got back from work that very day and met Frederick on the couch watching TV. We exchanged our greetings and I headed to the bathroom to change. I came down after a couple of minutes and went to eat dinner. After I had my dinner, I was about to go up when Frederick called me and told me he wanted to discuss something with me. I nodded and sat down and asked him what it was. He looked at me and asked me if everything was okay and if there was anything I'm hiding from him. I was confused at that moment because I didn't understand what he meant by that. I told him that everything was okay and he didn't stress further. I tried asking him why, but he said he was done talking to me. I got annoyed with the way he responded, and I told him immediately. Before I could understand what was going on, Frederick had fumed up. He yelled at me and told me to leave. I left angrily and went to bed. Few minutes later, I was over what had transpired between me and my husband. The thought of Derek came to my mind, and I felt happy again. I slept off thinking about him. The next morning, I made up my mind that I was going to the trip Derek offered me. I told my husband that I was having a business out of town, and I would be back in 3 days. He agreed, and I left for Derek's house. I didn't pack much so it won't be suspicious. I went to his house and we were set to move, but he got a call from someone. I didn't know who it was and I didn't bother asking him. A few minutes later, he walked up to me and told me that something had happened. I asked him what it was, but he didn't leave much details. He told me that he needed some money to sort out some things. He asked me if I can lend him some amount of money and he promised to pay me back as soon as he gets the money. I agreed because I knew that he was capable of paying me back, and again, that was his first time asking me for money. So, I told him to give me an hour to arrange for it. Our trip was canceled and I headed back to my store. I felt disappointed because I wanted to hang out with Derek outside our town. I went to my office and did some calculations and called Derek to send his details. Few minutes later, I wired him the money. He called and thanked me. I started sorting out a few orders and got to work with my employees. Few days later, I called Derek to hear from him. I haven't heard anything from him since the last time I wired him the money. I wanted to know if everything was okay with him. He picked up the phone and I asked if everything was okay. He said yes and would come see me in a couple of minutes. After getting off the phone with him, my husband walked into my store. I wasn't expecting him because it had been a while since he came to see me at the store. Frederick walked in looking sad. I asked him what happened, and he told him that there was an emergency at his workplace and he needed some money. He explained that someone tampered with the figures at his office and he's at the verge of losing his work. I felt sad for him, and at the same time I was helpless because it hadn't been long since I gave Derek money. I didn't tell my husband because he would be very angry with me. So I made a few arrangements to help my husband out because I didn't want him to lose his job. I was able to come up with something, and I gave my husband the money. I told him to keep me updated with things at his office. He left immediately, and he called me to tell me that he would get back to me soon. Not long after my husband left, Derek came. I asked him about what had happened a few days ago, but he looked like someone that wasn't in trouble. He told me that I shouldn't worry about my money, that he would pay back in a couple of days. I didn't think twice about it because I knew that Derek would pay me back. So guys, after Derek left my store, I made arrangements to close the store. It was 5 p.m. that day and I wanted to get back home early to know more about what went wrong in Frederick's workplace. I drove home and opened the door. Immediately, I entered the house and noticed a piece of paper on the center table. I didn't pay attention to it because I thought maybe it was my husband that had left it there. I went upstairs and freshened up. I went downstairs after a few minutes to call Frederick. I kept on calling him, but no response. I sent him a text message to know if everything was okay, but he didn't respond to any of my texts or calls. I went to the kitchen and prepared something for myself because I was very hungry at that time. I finished eating and decided to go watch some movies. I saw the white piece of paper and I thought of opening the paper to see what it was. Guess what, guys? It was not just an ordinary piece of paper, guys. It was a divorce papers. Update. So guys, Frederick served me divorce papers. He signed the papers, folded it, and placed it on the place I would be able to see it. Attached to the divorce papers, there was a written note from my husband. In the notes, Frederick stated that he knew about my infidelity and acted like he was ignorant about it. Not only that, guys, my husband also said that he knew Derek. They both worked at the same place. They teamed up together to scam me of my money since I decided to play them both and also with their emotions. My husband also wrote in the letter that I shouldn't bother calling him or even looking for him because he had signed the divorce papers and left the town with the money he and Derek scammed me of. I was reading the letter and didn't notice when I fell on my knees. I cried bitterly. My husband had taken the worst revenge on me. My life had been ruined because of that revenge. The money I gave both my husband and Derek was from my business. I didn't know what to do. I tried calling both their lines, but it was not reachable. I went throughout that night. Update. Guys, it's been a month since my husband got divorced. All means to reach out to him were in vain. I discovered that he had blocked my lines and also blocked me on all social media platforms. Apparently I got to know that Derek and my husband were co-workers. It was a few days ago that my husband told me all about what happened. Derek was recently transferred to my husband's workplace a few months ago. The time Derek and I were getting to know each other, he only told me that he had recently moved in because of work. I didn't bother to ask him the type of work he was doing. On the other hand, my husband had seen Derek coming to see me at my store a couple of times, and he decided to follow us to all the places we went to together. He called Derek and told him that he was going out with his wife. Derek didn't know that I was married because I kept it away from him. He was so angry and brought up the idea of scamming me. I don't know what to do right now. My business is crumbling. All the customers that ordered for designs are requesting for a refund because I haven't been able to meet their demands. I'm currently owing a huge amount of money because I've used all the money I had. I have sold most of my things and it seems like the figures keep adding up. I tried calling Derek, but he had already blocked my lines. He didn't return the money I gave him, and my husband is not even planning to see me. I have made a very big mistake by cheating on my husband with a total stranger. Derek scammed me and ran away with my money. I really messed up. This is my story, guys. Goodbye.